So a few years ago, I made a video about a movie called Promising Young Woman by Emerald Fennell. It's a pretty divisive movie for how it handles its premise, and a lot of people take great issue with its ending, but I still really valued the jumping off point it provided for conversation, and I am very proud of that video. It was a video that required a lot of care and nuance and thought on how people might engage with that type of subject matter, and Saltburn is not that, but boy is there still so much to talk about. Largely set in 2007, Saltburn is a psychological black comedy written and directed by Emerald Fennell that locks us in with Oliver, an awkward Oxford scholarship student who quickly becomes obsessed with the charming and wealthy Felix Catton. When school ends for the summer, Felix invites Oliver to Saltburn Estate, where he's overwhelmed by the Catton family's eccentricities and detached behavior. This is the type of wealth that doesn't really exist outside England. Exceedingly old family money that comes with the type of status that can't be purchased, that just leads to people who have no real self-awareness or care to develop it. But all too quickly, the situation spirals as the lines of control begin to blur. It's a gothic-infused story of obsession, an all-consuming desire, demented first loves, and the way we clutch to things that may not love us back, and the destruction that that can cause. Then pushes the fallout of those ideas further than you may have anticipated, flipping the expectations of who's dominating who as Oliver just infects this family. A wild ride of a movie that's just hoping to make you feel anything at all, and based on these swaths of social media posts of varied reactions, I'd say it succeeded. Because the audience engagement with this movie is almost as important as what the movie itself is doing. Our entertainment, our shock, our disgust and confusion. Why some people will walk away completely disgusted by Barry's character, and others will end up being like mildly confused at how attracted they are to him. Or not confused about it at all if you're a little bit fucked up. Though side note on emotionally similar material, I believe that Saltburn would make a great double feature with Eileen, which is something I talked about almost a year ago at this point, but it is finally released, and we just got Thomas and Mackenzie being a creepy little weirdo, and maybe you'll get a full video on that. If you're interested, let me know down below. I had a blast catching this in theaters as a shared experience, but I do think releasing it to a streaming service over the holidays was the perfect choice because we all got to watch the internet burn a little bit. Saltburn, if you will. That wasn't even set up. I'm just an idiot. It's easy to see why something like Cruel Intentions had such a huge place in Emerald's psyche while she was working on this, while it might feel more comfortable to reach for something like The Talented Mr. Ripley. I know a lot of people were looking for this movie to go deeper in that class area, or upset that Fennell didn't really leave much to chew on, and maybe that's a fair critique, but hey, at least she left us with plenty to slurp on. No, I'm not sorry, this is cinema. But unlike the Cattons, I'm guessing you don't have swaths of multi-generational wealth, so today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help you keep that hard-earned money. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I know budgeting is something I have an impossible time with. There's just so many little things that add up in a month that it can just feel so overwhelming to even try. Rocket Money will analyze your spending and use that information to customize a budget that matches your lifestyle and makes it easier to see the areas you might be overspending. I know I spend way too much money on food delivery, which is something I'm sure some people can relate to, but with Rocket Money, you can set up goals in different spending categories and they'll send notifications when you're getting close to those limits. So not only do you save money, but you actively get to see the progress you're making. And one of the bigger benefits, they'll track and manage your monthly subscription, so if there's things you're paying for that you're not using, they make it easy to cancel in just a couple clicks, putting that money back in your pocket. There's really no better time of year to start taking control of your finances, so let Rocket Money give you the tools to make it happen by heading to rocketmoney.com/AmandaTheJedi or clicking the link in the description down below to get started for free. Now, complaints aside, I do actually think there's a fair amount to engage with in this movie. It may just not be in the way you want it. The movie absolutely uses class and power imbalances, but it's not trying to be an eat the rich story that so many people want it to be or believe it was. Though I suppose in the literal sense, it's absolutely an eat the rich story. I'm sorry. I just think it's way more interested in how that status interacts with desire. It's not about dismantling or changing the status quo. It's obsession for things we love and can't have and how destructive that can be. Which is kind of a good thing because Oliver, the closest thing we'd have to an audience insert, is completely fucking unhinged. And that's where the fun is. However, I am unintentionally gonna go down some thought holes in this video that sounds like I'm fighting for my life in an English exam when my main takeaway about this movie was, wow, that was wild. What a little weirdo. But love it or hate it, I think the strengths of Saltburn come more from the ride that it takes you on. I can understand an argument about it being more style than substance, that some of the logistics get sloppy, but I also think some people are just like really misreading aspects of the movie, and yeah, some of that might be the movie's fault. But the more I found myself trying to justify every little thought I've had with pieces of the script, things Emerald and the cast have said, things happening in the background of shots, the more I started to annoy the hell out of myself. What started as a little, hey, it's not perfect, but I had fun, became some convoluted mess that I haven't been able to pull myself out of. I have all these pieces and now I'm lost in them.
Quite alright. Lots of people get lost in Saltburn.
Just completely spiraled with it. Like I went through my pictures from 2007 to immerse myself in the digital camera era vibes and found that I had for some reason taken a picture of a super bad billboard before the movie even came out. Just like they're watching it before a screener copy was ever available. Is the movie trying to communicate with my past? The numbers, Mason! What do they mean? So I'm gonna go through it all, mostly, and try to take you along that journey, the iconic moments that have earned their own titles like the vampire scene in Tub Slurp, some creative details, character choices, I'll even weave in some of the script. It may not be perfect, but Emerald knows how to write a snappy piece of media and pulls you into the mood of the world she's operating in, and I appreciate that. Maybe people are overamping the twist that isn't that twisty, and I've seen people compare it to a bigger budget CW show, but you know what? If Riverdale had Emerald Fennell as a writer, maybe things would have turned out different. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But before I keep rambling, let's just dive in with some light thoughts I had. Now, I know people are really focused on the more shocking moments for understandable reasons, but I do think some of the stuff that hits the hardest is a lot more subtle, like the egg scene or karaoke night. And then there's just the funny moments that I'd like to see more highlights on.
I was a lesbian for a while, you know. But it was all just too wet for me in the end. Men are so lovely and dry.
One of my favorite things about this movie is how well each actor works with their character. You can see how they helped flesh out the vision, that they really care about them, even when they're terrible. But it obviously all hinges on Barry Keoghan, and yes, he pronounces the G in his name. I've been sassed for that before, but not today. Anyways, it hinges on him, and he is perfect. He masterfully works through every aspect required of his character. He's got a face and posture that can be used in so many different ways. He cycles through unassuming and awkward, uncomfortable and creepy, sinister and threatening, handsome and charming. And he's doing it all in this movie, but always with a little unsettling undercurrent. Something that ends up being the downfall to so many in this movie because they just couldn't conceive a situation where they weren't in control. You'll notice this movie does a lot with reflections and double images with Oliver, making the distinction between what people see on the surface and what's scheming underneath. We'll touch more on some of those performances as we go, but let's dive into the movie, which means spoilers. Now, I feel like there's one major misconception about this movie's ending that I'll be addressing, but I feel like I need to say what the misconception is now and then work my way through the movie to back it up. I won't tell you everything about the ending, but I will give you a chance to kind of like maybe go watch it and come back if for some reason my spoiler warning wasn't enough. But the general idea is that by the end, most of the Cattons are gone and Oliver is the new owner of Saltburn, weaving an elaborate explanation of how it was all a grand plan. But I don't think that's really the case, and Emerald Fennell would agree. This is primarily a twisted first love that's just founded in that like lust and obsession and what makes it spiral out of control. So just to clarify, because I know I've seen people being like, I didn't see any love there. It's not like a traditional, like pure love. Oliver is a little wacko, and that obviously translates into how he would express and feel and engage with love. But the movie opens with him talking about Felix. It seems like he might be getting interviewed, but we get the impression that he's no longer around. And Oliver is trying to stress that while he loved Felix, he wasn't in love with him. This is a very important piece of information because it lets us know he absolutely was in love with Felix and that we can't trust everything he says because he's lying to himself. Right from the jump, the movie is letting us know that Felix is the essential piece to the story, not Saltburn. The montages that accompany this opening scene really just drive that home, how perfectly he sees Felix, smiling, charming, then twisting to the moments of Oliver stalking around and smashing mirrors. Bringing us back to him arriving at Oxford and him immediately being othered. He's awkward and nerdy, not the put-together man we just met. People insult his clothing, cliques are long-formed, and nobody wants anything to do with him except this exceedingly aggressive young man named Michael.
I don't even like maths, really. I can just do it. Ask me a sum.
Nah, you're okay.
Come on.
No, I believe...
Fucking ask me a sum then!
At this point, we feel bad for Oliver. He's clearly happy to be at this prestigious university. He's a dedicated student, but isn't being seen the way he wants. Even his professor is more interested in seeking glamour than doing his job, gossiping with Felix's cousin Farley about his mother.
She's gonna be thrilled that I'm being tutored by one of her friends.
Oh, no, not friend. More, admirer.
No one in this movie is free of desire and lusting for more. And while the disdain between Farley and Oliver is mutual, Oliver can't help but be drawn to Felix, whether it's his looks, easy charm, lively social group, or all that and more. Oliver is enamored. And Jacob Elordi just really pulls off that wealthy charmer with nothing to prove because Felix never considered needing to. There's no insecurity because he avoids self-reflection and he's always gotten what he wants. And that lack of awareness means that he can treat people with a casual cruelty he doesn't even realize, making him naive to potential consequences. I don't necessarily think he's a bad person, I just think he's severely disconnected. But Felix remains completely oblivious to Oliver's existence until he comes across Felix with a flat tire and lends him his bike.
I mean, I'll just get it from you later. You're my college, so...
Am I?
Yeah.
Earning Oliver a seat at the pub despite Farley's protests.
This is my fucking hero right here. I was just telling everyone how you saved my ass yesterday.
And by all accounts, Felix seems like a great guy. He realizes that Oliver might not have the money to pay for shots, so he pretends to find Oliver's money on the ground so he won't feel embarrassed.
Pay it back tomorrow.
I don't know what you're talking about, mate. Thank you, Ollie!
But it sets the stage for this kind of savior complex that Felix has, and Oliver becomes the primary outlet for, with his drug dealer parents overcoming it all to get to Oxford.
You're a fucking inspiration, mate. Seriously.
Thank you.
Very cool.
And just like that, Oliver's swept up into an exciting world of parties and friends. It's everything he wanted. He finally fits in. He belongs, or so he thinks. While Felix does seem to enjoy Oliver's company, the feeling may not extend to the whole group, and it becomes clear that Felix might kind of see people like accessories.
He'll get bored of you. Excuse me?
We're given the impression that it's happened before, and now he's doing it to Ollie the same day he does it to a girl he's been seeing. The same girl that was judging him for being poor. But the shared betrayal pushes them together as substitutes for who they'd rather be with, that desire for someone they can't have the way they want to have them. She's just not quite as aware of that fact.
Do you think he'll be jealous?
I don't think I'll even fucking register.
It's a moment for us and Oliver to see who Felix really is, but instead of moving on, it just makes him more desperate to get back in Felix's graces. This is obsession. He's as deluded as he is infatuated. Almost equal desires of lust for him as there is to be him. So Ollie realizes that his mistake was probably trying to clean Felix's room. He doesn't like feeling like a child, even though his entire home life involves people cleaning up after him.
Only rich people can afford to be this filthy.
Ollie, fucking stop. I'm not a fucking child. I can do it myself.
So Oliver needs to find a way to flip that dynamic back, and conveniently, his father dying provides just that opportunity.
You think you'll go home?
I don't think I'll ever go home again.
Felix just feels so bad that Oliver doesn't feel like he has a home to go back to, so he invites him to Saltburn. So off to the land of riches he goes, and just knowing Felix is wealthy can't begin to prepare him or us for exactly how wealthy that old money is. It's literally a castle, completely overwhelming, and if you thought being a guest would earn him respect, no, Duncan the butler just has instant disdain for him. Then it's just the way that Felix casually tours through the estate as if it's a spare bedroom and not this grand castle loaded with history. The Cattons are the ultra wealthy, luxurious, but also try to downplay it in weird ways, like huddling together in a small room on a small TV, but then having black tie dinners every night.
Just for dinner?
Yeah, it's like black tie.
And then it doesn't seem like anybody wants to engage with him as an actual person. Like Venetia, the sister, views him as a specimen. Elspeth, the mother, a former model, is just so horny for the details of his life tragedy veiled as concern. An echo of what we saw Felix do earlier in the movie.
Sounds awful. Really? Was it awful?
I can't imagine anyone more perfect for Elspeth than Rosamund Pike. There's just an elegance to her as she says the most disconnected things to the people around her. Like her casual comments about people thinking the song Common People was written about her.
But she came from Greece. She had a thirst for knowledge. It couldn't have been me. I've never wanted to know anything.
Which is a line she apparently helped write, but it echoed Felix's statement that a lot of Evelyn Waugh characters are based on his family. Brideshead Revisited probably came to a lot of people's minds that were familiar while watching this movie. Even when she's dishing out an insult, it can come across as a compliment, which just makes it all the more uncomfortable. But it's just so many little interactions that leave Oliver feeling embarrassed and shamed, even though he has no way of knowing how they do things.
Can I get a full English breakfast too, please?
Breakfast is on the side, darling.
But just like with Felix, he wants these people to like him, so he's willing to entertain and put on a show to cement his welcome. Because everyone outside the direct family is performing for their place. Farley's mother was cut off after she wasted through her money in America, and a chunk of Felix's father's too. So while he does live at Saltburn and Sir James funds his education, he still needs to play the game to maintain his lifestyle. There's also the added layer that comes from Farley being the only not white family member, while also being the only one that has to beg for what he feels was his from birth.
My father has been more generous than most people would be.
Also drawing attention to how ridiculous it is that Sir James wants Farley's mom to learn to support herself when he's never had to work a day in his life. Then there's Elspeth's friend, poor dear Pamela, who clearly overstayed her welcome but doesn't quite have the ability to leave, partially because she doesn't know how to take care of herself and partially because she's hiding from her violent Russian billionaire ex. Two fun facts about that. I love that Carey Mulligan read this script as a friend and said, "She's for me," and then I also love that she's always referred to as poor dear Pamela in the script as her title. But the second that Oliver arrives, you can see that picking order shift. Oliver's the new toy while Pamela's been relegated to tracking down T. Then I just feel like Saltburn itself becomes an entity. Emerald Fennell points out that the entire house is built for voyeurism. These estates are designed so the wealthy never see the staff, but the staff needs to see everything to do their jobs and slip out unnoticed. So no matter where you are and what you're doing, there's a chance someone's watching.
Can I help you?
They then took this one step further by building that bathroom so the tub could be dead center instead of tucked in a corner, mirrors on both sides so you can always see behind you. Making way for the infamous bathtub scene, Oliver watching Felix pleasure himself bathed in light, then slurping up the remnants before they escape down the drain. And for me, it's not necessarily the slurping that goes too far, it's really the tonguing the dirty drain. Now obviously that was getting a lot of reactions, but I must let you know that Emerald sees this whole scene as deeply erotic and not particularly shocking, and I feel like I just want to have a conversation with her about that, but, at least we're not forgetting what a little weirdo he is. That there's definitely more at play here than just, I want big house. And in some ways, I do kind of see where she's coming from, that Oliver's desire and obsession is so extensive that it would push into acts that are wildly intimate and also revolting, something no one should see. In a Time interview, Fennell loosely quotes Catherine Breillat's movie Romance, that sexual tension isn't between two people, it's between desire and revulsion. And I don't know if this is quite what that would apply to, and I'm certainly not saying that Oliver isn't a creepy little weirdo in this moment, and it is just the tension between that desire and revulsion that this movie is aiming for. Yeah, that's right, we just aim for some nuance with cum tub. We're having fun. But I find the idea of voyeurism in this movie just really interesting in relation to the time period. Like, it's taking place in 2007, a moment just before smartphones kicked off and changed the way we engage with the world entirely. Now so much of what would normally be and potentially should still be private is blasted out for the world to see. The lack of self-awareness this family experiences, their distaste with acknowledging exactly how ridiculously out of touch they are, easily could have been undercut by one ill-worded tweet. But this is where we start to see Oliver playing the game. He sees how Pamela overstayed her welcome, even if they don't directly say it, and she knows it too.
You must be desperate to be rid of us and find your own place. I quite understand.
Add in how he's been told multiple times that Felix has a tendency of getting bored with these different summer projects.
I think I like you even more than last year's one. Night.
So he doesn't just need to stay interesting to Felix, he needs to gain everyone else's favor too, sneaking around the estate to read books about things Sir James is interested in.
Do you mean Bernard Palissy, the 16th century Huguenot ceramicist?
Yes. Do you know him?
Learning that Venetia has an eating disorder and manipulating that to make her feel vulnerable so he can build her back up. Though I just have to comment on how Elspeth describes her own daughter's disorder.
Oh, no, fingers for pudding.
I didn't know.
Well, exactly. Hasn't even helped. Complete waste of time.
Like, this is just petty gossip and not her daughter's physical and mental well-being. This whole scene is fascinating. Her wild comments, Oliver seeming to go for seduction before switching gears when the pause lasts a beat too long.
Because you're so fucking beautiful.
Commenting that Elspeth shouldn't feel bad sending Pamela away because it seemed like she may have been exaggerating her stories for sympathy. Foreshadowing!
I thought you noticed it too.
Oh, yes, I had. Absolutely.
Something she absolutely hadn't thought of, but takes great comfort in his comments to clear her guilt. But it shows how much of a cautionary tale poor dear Pamela is for him. He can't get by on being pathetic and less fortunate alone, he has to be what they all want. Or at least what he thinks they all want. With Venetia, it comes down to wanting to be seen, to be beautiful, and Oliver gives her that in the most extreme way with the vampire scene.
It's lucky for you, I'm a vampire.
Which again transgresses into that area of disgust, of shock, of going too far, but it's used so Venetia sees that he finds every piece of her to be beautiful and arousing, even the parts others would find disgusting. I think he probably could have just left it to the finger banging, but Emerald really wanted to push that idea of worshipping every aspect of her body. But to that I say, no thank you, keep those fingies away from my mouth. At this point, he's already made her vulnerable by revealing that he's aware of her eating disorder. Going that step further isn't something she's experienced before, and now she's the one looking for his approval. But back to voyeurism, this whole event happened in plain sight of Farley's bedroom.
You stupid little boy.
And obviously goes right to tell Felix, knowing he'll be upset because this same situation has ruined a friendship before, but with no struggle, Ollie lies right through it. Topped off with a little compliment for Farley so Felix doesn't even have to be stressed about further conflict. So much to show us that Oliver is nowhere near as vulnerable as we may have initially assumed. But it's clear that Farley's a direct threat, so Oliver calls him out and extends a little bit of a flirty olive branch, leading right into that karaoke scene that is so impactful. Farley has him sing Rent by the Pet Shop Boys, and Oliver is the last one to realize what he's been set up for as an awkward embarrassment settles around the room.
I love you, you pay my rent. Woo! This is your song as well, Farley, come finish it.
He's right that it also applies to Farley, but it is still an ego blow. Oliver is livid. Every time he thinks he's getting a little bit of control, something happens to just cut him down, and he can't handle that. So Farley's gonna have to go.
Are you going to behave from now on, Farley?
No.
This definitely does it for Farley in some way, but this wasn't to seduce him like with Venetia. Oliver just wanted access to his cell phone. Because the next morning, Farley's being ushered away for trying to sell off rare items from the estate. They confirmed that Oliver was behind this later, but it felt very obvious in the moment. But even with Farley gone, there's just no way to keep everyone equally entertained, at least not in the way that Oliver's approaching it. Like, he immediately had to back off Venetia, and she has no interest being a secret. He lost her the second he started paying full attention to Felix the next day.
I mean, he never liked sharing his toys. Even the ones he doesn't want to play with anymore.
Sir James is still mostly neutral, Duncan's never come around on him, but it all falls apart when Felix's surprise for Ollie's birthday is visiting his mom to repair their relationship.
You've been ignoring her calls for weeks, and I just thought that maybe I could help.
The savior complex that built Oliver up is the exact thing that's gonna break him. Because the big reveal, something that I find bigger than what we end up seeing at the end, Oliver's family is completely and totally average. There's no drugs, no poverty, just aggressively normal like the script says. Oh, and his dad, very much alive. It's so awkward. But also this was foreshadowed when the rock Felix gave him to throw in the water as a funeral tradition didn't go in the river because he wasn't actually dead.
Well, that can't be good.
Oliver wanted an in. He wanted to be interesting to Felix. He really wanted to be overcoming some kind of adversity, and there is nothing interesting in aggressive normality right after someone said their family was the basis for the works of a famous author. So he spins this lie, and it just kept growing.
I just wanted to be a friend.
It is absolutely unhinged behavior. Like, we know he's been lying to get what he wants while he's at Saltburn, but now we know how far that actually extends.
They didn't know what to do with him at his school. He was so clever.
You know, it's kind of a normal thing to see university as an opportunity to reinvent yourself, but there's a limit. Now, some people think he exaggerated everything, like right from the moment he arrived, but I do think he spent most of his life being this awkward nerd without many friends who kind of rejected his family just based on what his parents have said. And he's even putting them through the lies, saying that he was the top scholar, he's doing plays on the rowing team. It's also terribly awkward, and I feel so bad for the parents, but just Oliver got this taste of the reality he wants, the person he wants to be, and now it's just being ripped away. But to keep up appearances, Felix says they need to make it through Oliver's party, and this is where everything hard shifts. Oliver's humiliated multiple times when he realizes that Farley's been invited back.
They can't.
I've invited you.
Oh, Oliver, this place, it's not for you.
Humiliated again when not one of the guests knows his name.
Shit, I can't remember his name.
All topped off with his final pleas for Felix to accept and forgive him, to see what he's done for him just completely shut down.
I just gave you what you wanted! Everyone puts on a show for Felix. So I'm sorry if my performance wasn't good enough.
You made my fucking blood run cold.
It doesn't matter what he does, how hard he tries, all his little manipulations, he'll never be one of them. But before he can be sent on his way the following morning, Felix's body is found in the maze, dead of an overdose, exactly where Oliver left him. So whatever went down, Oliver seems equal parts guilty and devastated, but we are about to see the extent that Elspeth and Sir James ignore unpleasantness. It was touched on when they sent Farley away.
What happens if I bring him up?
They won't.
What a glorious day.
Then there's the comment made after they find out Pamela died.
Pamela died.
She'd do anything for attention.
Which is particularly cruel considering she was probably killed by her ex-boyfriend.
All of his business partners started sort of falling out of windows. Daddy always said I'd end up at the bottom of the Thames.
This whole estate runs on concealing reality, the way the mirror is repaired by the time Oliver gets back to his room as if nothing ever happened. And now just insisting that they eat lunch as their son's body is being carted out of a maze. Casual conversation to avoid having to deal with any of it, and Oliver just plays right along.
I don't normally like chocolate cake.
Yes, it can be cloying, can't it?
And it's just so unsettling how casual he's able to be. Like, people are barely holding themselves together. Venetia just spilling over the glass with wine. The blinds bathing the whole room in a blood red.
We haven't finished lunch.
The lunch is cold.
Will you be quiet? Sit down and eat the bloody pie. Just eat it.
Before Farley is permanently banished from Saltburn after Oliver reveals that he's the one who had drugs at the party.
I won't mention this to the police. That's all you'll get, ever again.
But even with Farley gone, it's not enough for Oliver to be in the family. He can't mourn the loss with them and obviously, dude, you're just this guy they brought home for the summer. Along with Reflections, this movie also ties in doppelgangers as death omens. They have a whole conversation about a maid seeing the poet Shelley's doppelganger, only to have him die a few hours later while abroad. And while this conversation is taking place, someone who looks just like Felix walks by the window, foreshadowing his death and symbolic replacement.
Shelley walked past the window and waved at her.
Though you could say that the way the movie starts with just always referring to Felix in the past tense, that you could have assumed he was already dead, but it was fun. But it leads to the third scene that people just can't stop coming back to, fornicating with the grave. And as absurd as it sounds, there are a range of emotions here. It's weeping over the loss of this love and obsession, the grief he feels, the desperation to be close to Felix again, trying to get something out of a situation that's never gonna change, his body racked with sobs. Barry said that it's not about getting off with the grave, it's just that Oliver literally has no idea to do with all that energy from the obsession anymore, that he knows what he's doing is wrong and appalling, but it's just raw emotion. The destructive side of loving things and people that can never love us back. Fennell specifically wanted the moment to tie back into Gothic literature where sex and death are so often linked, specifically mentioning Heathcliff trying to dig to Catherine's coffin in Wuthering Heights. Which is funny because I hated that book so much in high school, but it is exactly what that moment reminded me of. Yes, obviously it's also funny in an uncomfortable way. It's disgusting and a violation, but it plays through that absurdity by immediately having him pick dirt off his pants in the next scene. Yeah, obviously they're going for a degree of shock value even if they don't want to openly say that, but I'm fine with that. This is where I feel like the desire for Saltburn itself starts to build. If Felix was his obsession and connection to this life he loves, those emotions have to go somewhere new, and if he's gonna keep getting shut out by it, what is the thing those people who are shutting him out care about the most? And with Farley making it abundantly clear that none of this is for him, the fixation makes sense. At this point, the only lifeline he has is Elspeth wanting him around for comfort. Everyone else thinks it's a little bit weird he's still here. And the scene with Venetia was really fun to read because he's still not sure where he falls with her. Is she upset and trying to provoke him into intimacy? Will they find comfort in each other? Is it a game or just cruel honesty?
You only knew him for 6 months? You hardly knew him, Molly.
She just sees him as something so little, an infection that's worked its way through the entire house, and he hates that feeling of humiliation. But then she's gone too.
She said it herself. She couldn't live without him.
And what follows is super twisted. Sir James wants him to go so that they can grieve their children as a family, but Elspeth's just kind of been clinging to him for support to ignore it, and Oliver uses that to refuse leaving.
You won't go.
I don't see how I can.
So Sir James has to pay him off, presumably with enough to set up a nice life, and then he finally agrees to go. And then it's not until years later when Oliver sees that Sir James has passed that he reconnects with Elspeth.
But you're all grown up. Of course you're grown up. Of course.
It's heartbreaking being so happy to see him doing well, then realizing he grew up and that her children never will. But it's in that moment of shared unhappiness that she invites him back to Saltburn, when it's revealed that it's her body in a coma that he's been talking to. I once again had to switch location and decided to do some ambient lighting for the occasion. So this is absolutely where things get messy, but allow me to work through my thoughts. Oliver starts revealing this grand plan of all the ways he manipulated the family that we didn't directly see. But you have to remember that this entire movie started out with a lie, him lying about his emotions for Felix. His desire to downplay those emotions and refusal to see his own issues will absolutely affect how he's presenting things to us. So when he poked the hole in Felix's tire, a lot of people took that as him targeting Saltburn before he'd ever been there. But he clearly just wanted a reason for Felix to talk to him, to see him positively.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
I loved him. By God, I loved him.
And then he lies about not having money so Felix can repay the kindness. And then he says his dad dies to regain the attention, and then he finds ways to manipulate people in the family to like him. And then he sets up Farley to be kicked out for humiliating him, and then, as Fennell says. It's the rejection, the constant humiliation, being denied that life he so badly wants that evolves into the desire for Saltburn. To take away what they love after Felix is dead. You can say there wasn't a clear enough transition from wanting Felix and to fit in to wanting Saltburn itself, and that's fair. There's absolutely things that could be fleshed out more, and the movie potentially prioritizes the oh my god, no way experience, but I don't think this was trying to show a perfectly executed decade-long scheme. Sir James didn't die for about 15 years after Oliver left Saltburn. He had no hand in that, he just uses it as an opportunity to orchestrate running into Elspeth. Because I think those 15 years built up a lot of animosity, the exact thing Farley told him would happen at the party.
It is an anecdote you'll bore your fat kids with at Christmas. You'll cling on to it, but you don't get it back.
Oliver's just not someone who's ever gonna honestly engage with the things he's done. How hurt he actually was by it all, so he's gonna reframe it so it seems more like this triumphant master plan. The only full moments of honesty we're getting from Oliver is when he reflects on the moments he hated Felix because Felix didn't love him back, because he discarded him. A hate that can only come because of how all-consuming those emotions were. But again, not a pure love, it's an obsessive desire that leads him to drugging the champagne that killed Felix. He refused to be rejected in that way. Again, unhinged. Then we get to Venetia, and she is already breaking down when Oliver says he leaves the razor blades next to her in the tub. She belittled him, so he nudged her along. Not to downplay what happened, but a lot of people think he physically did it, but I don't think that's the case. I think he just left things there for her to do it herself. Up to now, where it seems like he's slowly been poisoning Elspeth based on how quickly she declines, but not until she names him heir of Saltburn. I just think it's easier to tell himself that he always hated all of them when he did so badly want to be one of them. He doesn't want to admit how parasitic he is as much as the Cattons refuse to acknowledge how they treat people. And I think this scene with Elspeth is actually one of the more unsettling. Just ripping out the breathing tube is absolutely his biggest act of desecration. And I know some people's instant reaction was like, oh damn, that's crazy, but he's still performing. This isn't honesty. He's rewriting history, so he's the victor and not the one who was made to feel humiliated and small. That he lost his obsession and the idealized life that came with it. So I think this reveal moment was absolutely for shock value. It gets messy the more you think about it. There's so many different ways that people can get lost in different assumptions, but I won't say it wasn't a fun ride. Before we cut back to Saltburn, Theseus killing the Minotaur, definitely some added symbolism here. It seems like Oliver is the Minotaur. The body was even based off his, just looming over Felix. But then it seems to flip Felix or the family as a whole as the Minotaur to be defeated, and like Theseus, Oliver going on to usurp the crown. But he ascends to his throne by dancing around naked to murder on the dance floor, a recall to the tour Felix gave all those years ago. And yeah, he's a creepy little weirdo. He dove back into the lake to get all their funeral rocks and props them on the Catton dancer box perfectly in their places to finally be performing for him. Very fun little moment, but I know one of the things throwing people off is Emerald saying that if they'd done their jobs right, you're on Oliver's side. And I'm just gonna take that as people loving a good villain, that you just get so swept up in the weirdo stuff you can't wait to see what he does next. Not that you think he's actually good or should win, because he doesn't really do that. He may have established the territory and thinks he's having the last laugh, but he didn't get what he wanted, so he tried to become it instead.
I promise I'll look after this house just as Felix would have.
As fun as that was, I preferred the original idea for the ending, that he heads down to breakfast, Saltburn his, only to have Duncan serve him the same runny, sunny side up eggs instead of the over easy he asked for. Doesn't matter what a piece of paper says, he'll never be what he so desperately covets. He'll never have full control. And Duncan is very aware of what he's done. And I know they changed it because they wanted him to have this triumphant moment, but I don't think he needed a complete one. Like, let him have the fun dance, but then sober it with the eggs. Because even Emerald's the first to say that this is a hollow victory. So I suppose my main complaint would just be to do a little bit more for something that shows so much in the end. I think it lacks some connective tissue to make parts of it feel more satisfying. I also think that would help with people walking away thinking his entire intention was to get Saltburn and that's what every aspect of his manipulation was for. Tell me, friends, what does tub slurping have to do with getting a house. But I can't deny that I got swept up in that style. There's all sorts of little visual nods. Oliver the deer, prey that was actually the predator, the changeling boy fought over for entertainment, Elspeth as Queen Titania wanting to help her less fortunate projects. But I guess I take a little bit less of that metaphorical inclusion just to really iron out a few more moments with those characters in the story. And all that was really just to say, I thought that was a fun ride. I had a blast. I know it's not perfect, but I don't care. As long as there's enough substance to tie that style together, which I believe there was, I'm gonna let it ride. I think you can argue that there's movies who do a lot of these core ideas better or engage with it in a different way and are trying to make a point, but I don't think everything needs to be trying to say something on like a higher level. I think it's fine for it just to be about destructive obsession and how the Cattons' disconnected entitlement made them naive to the threat. And it's obviously fine if you did want a lot more and this movie just doesn't work for you. I'm not gonna call you out on that. I'm just saying why I enjoyed it. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Did you love this movie? Did you hate it? Did you fall somewhere in between? There's been a lot of interesting discussions around this movie. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks again to Rocket Money for sponsoring the video. Check them out down below. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my social medias are down below if you want to follow me there. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.